Regigigas is the face of Pokemon with bad abilities, but Archeops is right behind it. It's funny that Game Freak didn't even have creativity when nerfing Archeops, because the fetus is just kind of slow start, but a different variation of it, and it deals with HP. But it did have more of a life in competitive Pokemon, because it can be useful right off the bat, unlike Regigigas. It's just that it can't be useful for long. That's overall the problem with Archeops. Pokemon that tend to do well in competitive Pokemon are Pokemon that can last. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely room in competitive Pokemon that are frail, like Iron Valiant, Weavile, Namorous, etc. But usually, the higher you get on the ladder, the more, and this is a bit of a generalization, but the more teams start to resemble more bulky offense or balance, so that you can last longer versus teams that are like stall. Hyper offense teams are usually a little bit rare to see on the high ladder, if we're being honest. For example, to take an example in current events, Entei on Speed recently got banned, and a big part of that is because of his good offensive capabilities, plus bulk, and the fact that he has Morning Sun for reliable recovery. A Pokemon that can last long is pretty much the antithesis of Archeops, so it's no wonder it never saw that much success in competitive Pokemon. Archeops can do a good amount of damage while he's on the field at least, but with these bad defenses, a timer on him, and a typing that leads him to have way too many weaknesses, any success that he saw in the past is limited and, well, a thing of the past. He was ranked RU in his debut generation, which honestly, for an ability as bad as a fetus, that's way better than I thought. Regigigas literally wishes he could at least be at RU. And in RU, he was actually kind of scary. He was a good threat and he hit hard, and honestly, that's all you could really ask for a Pokemon like Archeops. It's just that he's not terribly reliable. He doesn't have very good bulk, limited turns to use those offensive capabilities, and limited bulk to use those offensive capabilities. So the obvious happened. In the next generation with Power Creep, he dropped to NU. And in Gen 6 NU, the same problems that were there in Gen 5 RU were still present, it was just worse. Even his move pool couldn't help him, because he actually had pretty good utility moves in Defog and Stealth Rock. But Pokemon who usually are utility mons are a bit more on the resilient side, and usually aren't basically OHKO'd by a Stab Scald. Whether it was offense or defense, it couldn't particularly realize its potential, whether it was because of its awful ability or bad typing compared with really bad defensive stats. As in his debut generation, he was ranked RU, and right now, he's not even in Gen 9. You can only play him on National Dex. And in Generation 8, he was ranked PU. So imagine how he would have dealt with the power creep of Gen 9. He probably would have been untiered. Overall, he hasn't had an impressive journey. You're bound to run into problems if you're using him. Therefore, it really shouldn't be much of an issue fixing him, because all you have to do is change the fetus for literally any other ability that isn't slow start. Well, in order to buff him, I'm actually not going to change his ability. And I'm kidding, I actually am. But I definitely am going to change it. And I'm actually going to be treating this as if I'm giving him a Mega, since Megas are coming back. And I'm going to embrace his hyper offense capabilities. So instead of just sticking with the fetus, I'm going to give him Tough Claws, a great ability that gives a boost if a Pokemon makes a move that makes contact. Previously, he was a mixed attacker, but my version of Archeops is going to be a lot more physically oriented, since even though he was a mixed attacker beforehand, he was mostly using physical attacks, and he had a higher physical attack stat than special. Tough Claws makes sense as well, since many Pokemon who have gotten Megas beforehand have gotten Tough Claws as a new ability, including Mega Metagross, Mega Charizard X, and Mega Aerodactyl. Now, could you call it lack of creativity on my part? Yes, but you could also call it consistency. Anyways, the next thing I'm going to change is its typing, which might surprise people, but hear me out. Flying Rock makes sense, sure, obviously it does have wings, but there's other Pokemon who have wings and don't have a flying typing, like Flygon, Venomoth, and Celebi. So I'm going to give it a Dragon typing. I know that there's already a Fossil Dragon type Pokemon in Tyrantrum, but there was already a Flying Rock type Pokemon before as well in Aerodactyl. Also, the animal Archeops is based on is the Archaeopteryx, and there's a dragon called the Amphitrus that's also based on that same dinosaur. So I actually feel like it would make more thematic sense to make him the dragon type rather than Tyrantrum, which I always thought was kind of a random Pokemon to type as a dragon. Plus, even comparison-wise, I wouldn't say Tyrantrum looks any more dragon-like than Archeops. Besides that, there aren't a lot of good physical flying type moves besides Brave Bird. And while I can give him Brave Bird, I would hate to have him have two good stab moves, both have recoil damage, since I feel like that would put way too much of a timer on him, and I would like him to last longer than just a few turns. Besides that, the only thing that flying did was give him a weakness to stealth rocks and to volt switch. You could say that's the reason that he has access to defog, but lots of Pokemon have defog even if they're not part flying, like the Latios twins. Besides that, I want to talk about moves. I only really want to give him 2 new moves in Dragon Dance and Glaive Rush, since his move pool was never really the problem. Glaive Rush is the signature move of Excalibur, but Pokemon uses the terms signature moves pretty loosely and usually does give them to other Pokemon.
And before anyone says anything like, oh, but that's the signature move of a Pokemon, you can't give it to another one, Pokemon has plenty of times giving other Pokemon the signature move of certain Mons, like Water Spout of Kyogre or Aurora Veil of Alolan Ninetales.
Glaive Rush makes contact, so that's pretty great since it gets stab on it, and of course Tough Claws comes into the picture. Besides that, he already has a pretty fantastic move pool, since he has access to Roost, U-Turn, which again makes contact, Head Smash, Defog, and Stealth Rock. This is pretty great since he has not only 2 good stat moves, but also moves that benefit his teammates in Defog and Stealth Rock. However, now I want to talk about stats. I could technically leave his stats like that, and it would be okay, but I don't want to do that since giving him a Mega and not changing his stats seems like a little bit of a waste. So I've decided on giving him a 160 attack stat, based 90 defenses, cutting his special attack to 50 since we're not going to use it, and raising his speed to 120. This totals out to 585. Slightly over his previous base stat total. I want him to be more resistant, therefore I boosted his defenses, and the change to speed was so that he could beat out some threats in OU, like Cinderace, Iron Valiant, and Roaring Moon. The attack boost, well, was just there because what's a Mega without giving a little bit of an attack boost? And if his attack stat seems too high, just remember that in National Dex where Megas are legal, Mega Bayonet has an attack stat of 165, Diancie has an attack stat of 160, and Tyranitar has an attack stat of 165 as well. And they're all ranked OU and not particularly overpowered, and not even that high of a usage rate as well. So this is Mega Archeops that I came up with, or as I like to call it, Archeops on crack.